Listen to me. Fear has been lying to you your whole life. It told you you're not ready. It told you you're not enough. It told you they'll laugh, they'll reject, they'll leave, and you believed it. But what if I told you the greatest version of yourself is living on the other side of the very thing you're afraid of? What if I told you fear isn't a wall, it's a doorway, and the only thing keeping you from walking through it is you? You keep waiting for fear to leave before you move, but fear doesn't leave. You conquer it. You look it in the eye. You speak to it. You command it to submit to your purpose. You don't wait for courage to come like it's Amazon Prime. No, you take the first step while you're shaking, and the strength comes after obedience. You take detachment means you don't care. No, detachment means you're no longer controlled. Controlled by opinions. Controlled by outcomes. Controlled by emotions. When you detach, you ascend. When you let go of what they think, you rise to what he thinks. When you let go of needing to be liked, you start doing what's right. Some of you can't overcome fear because you're still emotionally attached to validation. You need the applause. You need the approval. You need the confirmation. But warriors don't move by applause. They move by assignment. You want to overcome fear, then stop feeding it. Every time you delay, fear gets stronger. Every time you rationalize, fear gets louder. You think fear sounds like screaming. No, fear whispers. It says, play small. It says, not now. It says, maybe later. It's the quiet lie that kills giants before they even rise. And I came to tell somebody, faith and fear don't ride in the same car. One of them got to get out. One of them got to walk. You either drive with destiny or you sit with doubt, but you don't get both. You want purpose? Then pick a side. You want peace? Then choose your master. See, emotional and spiritual detachment ain't weakness, it's warfare. That's how you take your power back. That's how you silence fear. When you stop reacting, you start ruling. When you stop depending on feelings, you start walking in faith. You stop negotiating with fear and you start dominating it. The most dangerous version of you is the one who doesn't need external confirmation to act. The most powerful version of you is the one who can lose everything and still say, God is enough. When you get there, fear has nothing to work with. When you get there, the enemy can't shake you. Why? Because you've been shaken already and you didn't break. Let me tell you something. Fear is a gatekeeper. And the life you've been praying for, the one you journal about, the one you cry about, is behind that gate. And the only way you get through it is if you show fear. It doesn't run nothing here. You tell fear, move. You tell doubt, not today. You tell hesitation, you had your chance. And you walk scared. You walk trembling. You walk crying. But you walk because that walk is what changes everything. Stop waiting for perfect conditions. Stop waiting for peace to show up before you move. You get up and you become peace. You become strength. You become the answer. You become the boldness that fear tried to take from you. This is the moment you separate. This is the moment you let go. Let go of the fear. Let go of the outcome. Let go of who you thought you needed to be and step into who you were born to be. Because when fear bows, purpose rises. And when you stop feeding fear, you finally become free. Fear is a lie disguised as logic. That doesn't show up in your life screaming like a monster. No, it shows up dressed in a suit and tie, sounding intelligent, reasonable, calculated. It whispers things like, be careful, maybe wait, it's not the right time. And you nod your head thinking you're being wise, thinking you're making mature decisions. But in reality, you're not making moves, you're making excuses. That's a trick of fear. It doesn't always feel like fear. Sometimes it feels like good sense. It masquerades as caution when really it's just hesitation baptized in insecurity. This lie creeps in, especially when you're on the verge of doing something different, something bigger than you. It'll speak through people you trust. It'll echo in conversations. It'll come through statistics, facts, and well-intentioned warnings. But just because something sounds logical doesn't mean it's aligned with your purpose. Not everything that makes sense to the world makes sense to your calling. Fear will have you rationalizing delay, justifying procrastination, and calling it preparation. But deep down, you know the truth. You're not stuck because of a lack of knowledge. You're stuck because of a lack of boldness. The mind is powerful, and fear knows how to use it against you. It takes your imagination, your God-given tool, to see what isn't yet real, and hijacks it to play horror films of what could go wrong. You start seeing rejection before you even try. You start seeing failure before the first step, and then fear says, see, it's not worth it. But fear doesn't have the power to predict the future. It only has the power you give it through agreement. Every time you believe the lie, you partner with it. And every partnership has a price. People don't often talk about how fear will build you a prison and hand you the keys at the same time. It doesn't keep you trapped. It convinces you to stay. It builds invisible walls made of doubt, and you decorate those walls with reasons. I have kids. I'm too old. I need more time. It's too risky. But the real risk is letting fear talk you out of becoming who you were created to be. The truth is, real wisdom listens to purpose, not panic. It listens to vision, not volume. Logic that contradicts your assignment is not wisdom, it's sabotage. And if you don't learn to discern the voice of fear, you'll start calling your comfort zone a calling. You'll settle, you'll shrink, you'll survive when you were born to soar. You overcome this lie by exposing it. Call it what it is. Stop giving fear new names like strategy or timing just to protect your ego. The moment you call it fear, you strip its disguise. The moment you expose it, you weaken its grip. Because the greatest threat to fear is not bravery, it's truth. And once you walk in truth, fear can't follow you. Point two, emotional detachment is not coldness, it's clarity. The world will try to convince you that if you're not constantly reacting, if you're not visibly shaken, if you're not overly invested in every outcome, then you must not care. But that's not true. Emotional detachment doesn't mean you're numb. It means you're no longer a slave to your emotions. It means you've learned how to feel deeply without letting those feelings dictate your direction. It means you've mastered the art of standing in the storm without letting the storm get inside you. People confuse being emotionally reactive with being emotionally alive. But maturity teaches you that not every feeling deserves a response. Not every thought needs to be entertained. Not every opinion needs to be absorbed. When you're emotionally detached, you gain the ability to see the situation for what it is, not what your fear or insecurity projecting onto it. You stop overthinking every conversation, every delay, every mistake. You stop internalizing rejection like it's a reflection of your worth. You stop taking things personally that were never meant to be yours in the first place. Emotional detachment is a posture of power. It's what allows you to choose your battles instead of being pulled into every conflict. It's how you protect your peace when everything around you is designed to steal it. You're not avoiding connection, you're avoiding entanglement. You're not shutting people out, you're shutting drama down. Because when you know who you are, you stop needing every situation to affirm you. When you're rooted in truth, you stop bending for temporary feelings. Clarity comes when you remove the noise, and emotional detachment is the noise-canceling filter that lets you hear your purpose clearly. You don't react just because something triggered you. You pause, you process, and you proceed with wisdom. This is not suppression, this is stewardship. You're not ignoring your emotions, you're just not letting them drive the vehicle of your destiny. You feel them, but you don't follow them. In relationships, in leadership, in decision-making, emotional detachment gives you the edge. You don't lose your balance when people disappoint you. You don't abandon your mission when criticism shows up. You don't compromise your values just to be accepted. You show up fully present, fully loving, fully alive, but completely free from the need to control or be controlled. You got to get to a point where your peace is non-negotiable, where your joy isn't tied to results, where your identity isn't at the mercy of other people's opinions. That's when you truly start to live, not bound by reactions, but led by revelation. not swayed by storms, but anchored in vision. When you detach emotionally, you elevate spiritually. You're not running from life, you're running toward purpose, unbothered, unshaken, and unstoppable. Because clarity isn't born in chaos, it's born in calm. And calm only comes when you stop being a prisoner of your emotions and start becoming the master of them. Spiritual strength is found in the fire. It's not built in comfort, not discovered in calm, and not revealed in the applause. It's forged when everything you thought you needed is stripped away, and all you have left is your faith. The fire is the test, but it's also the teacher. It's where your convictions are separated from your convenience. It's where your true character shows up, not when the sun is shining, but when everything is falling apart and you still choose to stand. People want power without pressure. They want faith without fire, but it doesn't work like that. You don't get to grow in purpose without walking through something that challenges your soul. That fire is divine, not because it's pleasant, but because it's purifying. It burns off the pride, the fear, the insecurity, the distractions. It refines you. And when you've been refined, you're no longer shaken by what used to scare you. You no longer bow to the noise around you because you've learned to listen to the voice within. The fire exposes who's really in control. You think you're strong until life hits you in a way that brings you to your knees. You think you trust God until the job's gone, the support is silent, and the path is dark. That's when the truth shows up. Not the truth you speak when things are good, but the truth you live when things get hard. And if you let it, the fire will draw something out of you that comfort never could. In the fire, you discover you don't need what you thought you did. You realize the opinions that once controlled you don't matter. The approval you chase doesn't satisfy. The titles, the applause, the image, it all melts in the heat. What remains is what's real. And that's where your spiritual strength lives. Not in who you pretend to be, but in who you become when pretending is no longer possible. It's in the fire that you learn surrender, not the passive kind that folds under pressure, but the kind that says, even if I don't see the way, I'll still walk. Even if it doesn't make sense, I'll still believe. That's where your faith becomes a weapon. That's where your authority is activated. Because when you stop trying to escape the fire and start embracing what it's producing in you, you become unstoppable. Spiritual strength is never loud. It doesn't need attention. It's not performance, it's presence. It's when you can walk into a room and not say a word, but the atmosphere shifts because of what you've endured. It's when storms rise and you remain steady, not because you're fearless, but because the fire already tried to break you and failed. Don't run from the fire. Lean into it. Because when you come out, and you'll come out stronger, wiser, clearer, and more connected to your calling than ever before. The fire doesn't destroy you. It reveals you. And when it's done, you won't just have strength, you'll be strength. Confidence comes from knowing, not feeling. That's the difference between people who move with authority and those who hesitate in uncertainty. Feelings are unstable. One day they lift you high, the next they drop you into doubt. But knowing, true, deep, soul-level knowing is unmoved by external circumstance. When you know who you are, when you know what you're called to do, when you know who sent you, that knowing becomes your anchor. It becomes your compass. And that kind of confidence doesn't waver just because your emotions do. You can't build your confidence on how you feel when you wake up, or how others treat you, or how successful your last move was, because all of that changes. People change. Mood shift, outcomes vary. But when your confidence is rooted in identity, not in emotion, you can walk into any situation with your head high and your spirit grounded. You don't need a guarantee. You just need conviction. Conviction that you were made for this. Conviction that what's in you is greater than what's around you. Conviction that your value isn't up for debate, even if the world doesn't recognize it yet. That kind of confidence doesn't scream. It doesn't need to prove anything. It's quiet, steady, secure. It shows up even when fear is loud and rejection is real. It doesn't crumble under criticism because it's not built on approval. It doesn't need applause to keep going. It moves forward whether the crowd is cheering or silent. Because when you know, you go. You don't second guess. You don't stall. You act not because you feel ready, but because you understand readiness is a choice, not a feeling. So many people wait for a magical moment when they'll feel confident enough to chase the dream, to step out, to speak up. But that moment doesn't come until after you move. Confidence is the fruit, not the seed. It comes after obedience, after risk, after stepping into the unknown and realizing you're still standing. Every time you move in what you know, even while feeling scared, you build a deeper reservoir of trust within yourself. And that trust becomes the foundation of unshakable confidence. You got to stop outsourcing your sense of worth to temporary emotions. You got to stop checking how you feel before making decisions that require faith. You won't always feel bold. You won't always feel brave, but you can still walk in boldness and bravery because those are not emotions. They are decisions rooted in what you believe to be true. And if you know the truth, that truth will carry you even when your feelings try to betray you. Confidence built on knowledge will outlast any storm. It will sustain you when the doors close, when the money's low, when the critics are loud, because you won't need certainty in your surroundings. You'll already have it within. When you stop chasing the feeling of confidence and start walking in the knowing of who you are, that's when the game changes. That's when the world sees a different version of you. Not one who is trying to impress, but one who has already decided, I belong here. You will never master fear until you face it repeatedly. Not once, not occasionally, but consistently. Mastery doesn't come through information. It comes through confrontation. You can read all the books, quote all the scriptures, listen to every motivational speaker, but if you never step into what scares you, fear will remain your master. The only way to dethrone fear is to do the very thing it's trying to stop you from doing. Again and again until the grip loosens, the voice fades, and your spirit remembers who's in charge. Most people think overcoming fear means eliminating it. They wait for a moment when they feel completely ready, totally unafraid, fully in control. That moment never comes. Mastery over fear doesn't mean fear disappears. It means it no longer controls the way you move. The first time you face fear, your knees shake, your hands tremble, your heart races, but you do it anyway. The second time, you're still nervous, but you remember you survived the first. The third time, your confidence begins to grow, not because fear left, but because you've learned how to function in its presence. Fear thrives in avoidance. The more you run from it, the bigger it gets in your mind. It multiplies in silence. It gains strength in delay. But once you face it, once you expose it, it begins to shrink. What used to paralyze you starts to feel manageable. What used to intimidate you becomes familiar. And with repetition, fear transforms from a mountain into a memory. Think about any skill you mastered. You didn't get there by thinking about it. You practiced, you failed. You kept showing up. The same applies to fear. If you want to be bold, practice boldness. If you want to be courageous, practice courage. Put yourself in spaces that stretch you. Spate when your voice shakes. Step out when the path is unclear. Confront conversations you've been avoiding. The only way to gain authority over fear is to meet it at the door and walk through it daily. Mastery also requires humility. You won't feel powerful at first. You might mess up. You might fall, but every stumble is a strike against fear's stronghold. Every small act of courage is a declaration that you refuse to be owned. That's the secret to transformation. It's not found in one grand act of bravery, but in daily decisions to move forward when retreat feels safer. People who master fear aren't fearless. They're faithful. Faithful to the mission. Faithful to the vision. Faithful to the higher calling that outweighs temporary discomfort. And the more they show up, the stronger they become. Fear may still speak, but it no longer sets the terms. It may still follow, but it no longer leads. Mastery is repetition. Mastery is resilience. Mastery is returning to the fire until it no longer burns you. It refines you. And if you commit to facing fear again and again, you'll wake up one day and realize it's not fear that's been chasing you. It's destiny pulling you forward through every wall you were once afraid to break. Purpose nullifies fear. When you truly understand your purpose, when it becomes more than a dream and turns into a divine assignment, fear starts to lose its power over you. It doesn't disappear, but it can't dominate you because purpose creates focus, and focus silences distraction. Purpose gives pain a meaning. It gives resistance a reason, and it gives fear a limit. When you are consumed by why you were created, you stop entertaining what was meant to stop you. Fear thrives in the absence of direction. When you don't know where you're going, everything feels like a threat. Every opinion matters too much. Every obstacle looks like the end. But when you are rooted in purpose, you interpret fear differently. You don't see it as a warning sign. You see it as confirmation that you're moving in the right direction. You stop asking, what if I fail? And start asking, what happens if I don't go? Because not walking in purpose becomes scarier than rejection, loss, or uncertainty. The power of purpose is that it rewires your priorities. It teaches you that your calling is more important than your comfort. It forces you to put your vision above your validation. Purpose makes you willing to be misunderstood, willing to be alone, willing to take the risk, not because you're fearless, but because you're aligned. You're no longer making decisions to be safe. You're making decisions to be significant. When you're living for something greater than yourself, you're willing to endure what others avoid. You stop quitting so easily. You stop folding under pressure. You stop shrinking in the face of adversity because purpose becomes the lens through which you see everything. The setback is not the end, it's a setup. The failure is not final, it's a lesson. The pain is not punishment, it's preparation. Purpose gives you a filter that keeps you from falling apart every time things don't go your way. People who walk in purpose don't wait for ideal conditions. They don't need applause, agreement, or a clear roadmap. They move even in uncertainty. They show up even when afraid because they understand something deeper. Fear can't survive where purpose is in charge. You either serve your fear or you serve your purpose, but you can't serve both. One has to bow. Every time you choose purpose over panic, your spirit grows stronger. Every time you act in obedience instead of hesitation, your fear weakens. Purpose brings momentum. Momentum brings confidence. Confidence brings power. And that power becomes unstoppable. Not because you're strong in yourself, but because you're aligned with something eternal. Purpose doesn't make the path easy, but it makes it clear. And once it becomes clear, the fear that once stood in front of you begins to look small. Because when you're walking in divine alignment, you realize fear was never the giant. It was only the gate. And now that you've tapped into purpose, you don't run from fear. You walk through it like it's already defeated. Because in the presence of purpose, it is. You can't serve two masters, faith and fear. They speak two different languages. They walk in opposite directions. And they produce two entirely different lives. One calls you higher. The other keeps you hostage. One demands trust in what you cannot see. The other demands control over what you think you need. Faith and fear do not coexist peacefully. They war for the throne of your heart. And whichever one you feed more is the one that leads your life. Fear says, play it safe. Faith says, step out. Fear says, what if it doesn't work? Faith says, what if it does? Fear convinces you that protection is better than purpose. Faith tells you that obedience is greater than outcome. Every decision you make is casting a vote, either for fear to lead you or for faith to guide you. And too many people are trying to walk the line, trying to balance both, not realizing that double-mindedness breeds delay, confusion, and spiritual paralysis. You can't move forward in purpose while holding hands with fear. It will always pull you back. It will always require compromise. Fear will ask you to play small, to settle, to wait for permission, but faith invites you into something bigger than your ability, something beyond your comfort, something that forces you to grow. Faith won't always make sense, but it will always make you stronger, because when you walk by faith, you start to see beyond what's visible. You start to operate by what's true, not just what's tangible. Serving fear looks like overthinking, avoiding risk, needing constant reassurance, and staying stuck in cycles you've outgrown. It's dressing up hesitation as wisdom. It's calling insecurity humility. It's postponing destiny for the illusion of safety. But there is no safety in stagnation. There is only regret. There is only what could have been if fear hadn't held the pen of your story. But when you serve faith, everything shifts. You start walking before you see the whole map. You start trusting that provision will meet you on the path of obedience. You stop needing everything to be perfect before you begin. You stop asking the wrong questions and start making the right moves. Faith doesn't ask for guarantees. It moves with conviction. It acts with authority. It speaks life into what hasn't even been born yet, because it knows, truly knows, that God finishes what he starts. The moment you declare that faith is your master, fear loses its seat at your table. It may still whisper, it may still knock, but it no longer decides. And every time you choose faith over fear, you strengthen your spirit. You elevate your thinking. You align your life. The cost of serving fear is too great. It robs you of time, peace, impact, and identity. But serving faith, that gives you vision, strength, movement, and legacy. You get to decide every day, every moment, which voice leads. Just remember, you were never created to follow fear. You were created to walk by faith, to live by truth, and to run your race with boldness. Only one can sit on the throne. Choose wisely. Fear is a signpost, not a stop sign. Most people treat fear like it's the final verdict. The red light that means turn back, the flashing signal that says this is not for you. But fear isn't meant to paralyze you. It's meant to point. It shows up right before the breakthrough, right before the moment that matters, right before you step into unfamiliar territory that carries the weight of your next level. Fear doesn't mean don't go. It usually means you're going in the right direction. And that's why you have to learn to interpret fear correctly, because misinterpreted fear leads to missed destiny. The presence of fear often signals the presence of something sacred. It shows up when the moment has weight. It shows up when your soul knows something is on the line. That conversation you've been avoiding, that leap you've been delaying, that vision you've been too afraid to voice. Fear shows up there because something powerful lives on the other side. And if you always treat fear like a stop sign, you'll never see the other side. You'll never know the version of you that lives beyond comfort. You'll stay in circles that feel safe but suffocate your potential. There is a difference between discernment and fear. Discernment is divine. It's wisdom from above. Fear is distortion. It takes the truth and twists it. It magnifies the worst and minimizes the best. Fear makes giants out of shadows and turns delays into denials. And if you don't confront it, you'll build a life around avoidance. You'll start taking detours around anything that triggers discomfort, but detours may delay you for years. There are some doors you can only walk through if you're willing to walk through fear. You have to get comfortable walking toward the very thing that makes your stomach turn. You have to train your spirit to say, if fear is standing here, something valuable must be behind it. And instead of backing down, you confront it not because you're fearless, but because you're faithful. Not because you have it all figured out, but because you've decided fear doesn't get the final word. Every time you take action in the face of fear, you disarm it. Every time you move through it, you make it smaller. And eventually it stops being a wall and starts becoming a window, something you look through to see the greater truth on the other side. Fear will show up at every threshold of transformation. It showed up when David faced Goliath. It showed up when Moses stood at the Red Sea. It showed up when Esther approached the king. But they didn't stop. They walked toward the signpost. They moved into the moment. And history changed because they saw fear not as a command to freeze, but as a clue to move forward. When fear stands in your way, don't bow. Don't turn around. Recognize it for what it is, a divine marker telling you that purpose is near. Fear is not your enemy. It's just a sign that you're getting close. True power is silent and unbothered. It doesn't need to announce itself. It doesn't have to prove anything. It doesn't react to every noise, every opinion, every shift in the atmosphere. Real strength carries a calm presence because it's anchored in something deeper than approval, applause, or attention. The world is loud. Fear is loud. Insecurity is loud. But power, the kind that comes from within, the kind that's forged in struggle and silence, that kind of power walks into a room and doesn't need to speak to be known. When you are spiritually and emotionally detached from the need to perform or impress, you tap into a higher dimension of authority. You're no longer reactive. You're no longer swayed by the chaos around you. You don't respond to every accusation. You don't chase validation. You don't engage in petty battles. You've reached a place where you understand that noise isn't a sign of death. It's often a sign of desperation. The strongest voices don't always speak the most. They move with precision, not panic. They move with purpose, not performance. The unbothered spirit is not indifferent. It's disciplined. It has learned to distinguish between what deserves energy and what is simply a distraction. When you've been through enough fire, when you stood through storms and didn't collapse, you realize you don't have to chase what's already yours. You become more focused on maintaining peace than proving a point, and that's when your influence multiplies. People start to follow you not because you demand it, but because you carry something they can't quite explain. It's the residue of resilience. It's the glow of a soul that's been tested and came out purified. Power that comes from ego will always need to be defended, but power that comes from purpose is untouchable. When your foundation is secure, you don't flinch at resistance. You don't fear silence. You don't feel the need to respond to everything. You know that not everything deserves your voice. Not every argument needs your presence. Not every attack deserves your retaliation. Silence is not weakness. It's wisdom. It's the ability to see clearly, to stay above the noise, to protect your alignment. Being unbothered doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care deeply, but not destructively. You care enough about your mission to not let everything pull you off course. You're not numb. You're focused. You're not distant. You're grounded. You understand that in order to carry the weight of your calling, you can't be weighed down by emotional baggage. You don't have time to prove yourself when you're too busy becoming yourself. Real authority doesn't raise its voice. It raises the standard. It doesn't chase attention. It commands respect through character, through consistency, through calm. So when the world is shouting, when fear is screaming, when doubt is echoing through every corridor of your mind, you stay still. You stay grounded. Because the most powerful people in the room aren't always the loudest. They're the ones who know they've already won, even before the battle begins. Freedom isn't the absence of fear, it's the domination of fear. So many people are waiting for fear to vanish before they move, before they speak, before they build, before they obey. But fear doesn't just vanish, it lingers, it waits, it whispers. And if you don't take authority over it, it becomes your master. Freedom doesn't happen when fear disappears. Freedom happens when fear no longer has power over your decisions. It's when you see the fear, feel the fear, and still choose to move forward. People think freedom is a feeling, lightness, ease, peace. And yes, those may come, but they are results, not requirements. Real freedom is gritty. It's intentional. It's built through repeated confrontation with the very things that try to control you. And fear is one of the biggest controllers of all. It binds people with invisible chains, not with bars or locks, but with thoughts, doubts, what ifs, and false narratives. And until you confront fear, until you look it in the face and speak to it with authority, you will always be a prisoner. Even if the door looks open, you don't dominate fear by talking about it. You dominate it by taking action in the very area it tells you to avoid. Fear says, don't apply. You apply anyway. Fear says, don't speak. You open your mouth and speak with clarity. Fear says you're not enough. You show up with all you have and trust that what's in you is more than sufficient. That's domination. That's authority. That's freedom. Because now you're no longer responding to fear, you're commanding it. And fear has no choice but to submit when you stop yielding your power. There's something powerful that happens when you stop asking fear for permission. You stop waiting for the fear to go away. You stop praying that the fear would vanish and instead start walking with faith right through it. That's when you realize fear was never your ceiling. It was your training ground, the place where you developed strength, the place where you proved your obedience, the place where you met your higher self. The moment you dominate fear is the moment you start living from a deeper truth, one that says nothing has power over you unless you hand it over. The enemy uses fear because he knows its potential. He knows if you buy into it, you'll sit on gifts that were meant to change lives. He knows if you believe the lie long enough, you'll bury your potential and call it timing. But when you dominate fear, when you stop bowing to its voice, you become dangerous, not in a reckless way, but in a purposeful, powerful, unstoppable way. Because nothing grips a soul like fear, and nothing frees a soul like overcoming it. You may never live without fear, but you can live above it. You can rise with it under your feet. You can make decisions that fear tried to kill. And when you do that, you don't just taste freedom. You walk in it, you lead in it, and you inspire others to do the same. That is what true freedom looks like. Not escape, but dominion. Everything you've ever dreamed of becoming. Everything you were born to do. Everything heaven placed inside of you before you ever took your first breath. It's all waiting on the other side of fear. You were never created to live in survival mode, controlled by anxiety, imprisoned by hesitation, or enslaved by self-doubt. You were created to reign, to walk in divine power, to move with boldness, and to lead with clarity. But you can't lead, you can't build, you can't fulfill your assignment if fear is still sitting on the throne of your mind. This isn't about being fearless, this is about being faithful. Faithful enough to move when you are uncomfortable. Faithful enough to rise when your emotions beg you to shrink. Faithful enough to trust the voice of God over the noise of fear. Because fear only wins when you stop moving. Fear only wins when you believe the lie that your future is fragile and your power is conditional. But when you remember that you were called for such a time as this, when you declare that fear no longer gets to speak louder than purpose, you shift the atmosphere of your life. So here's the truth. You can't run from. You will feel fear, but you must never follow it. You must never let it choose your direction, shape your destiny, or write your story. You owe it to yourself, to your future, to your calling, to walk like you're already free, because you are. The chains were broken the moment you decided to obey the voice of purpose instead of the voice of panic. You had to look fear in the eye and say, you don't own me. You don't get my time. You don't get my energy. You don't get another day of hesitation. I'm walking forward, not because I'm confident in myself, but because I'm convinced of my calling. I'm walking forward because my purpose is louder than my past. I'm walking forward because freedom is not a feeling. It's my birthright. And from this day forward, fear no longer leads. You do. Tools.